Rev up your engines! Here we have our upside-down government. The EPA gave a factory in Louisiana the green light to be making what they call biofuel from old plastic bottles, right? Sounds great. Oh, get the old plastic and turn it into biofuel. Well, it turns out this biofuel stuff, a lot of it is a bunch of nonsense that, oh yeah, it's a biofuel. Okay, you can go ahead and do it. Listen to this. Here's the problem with turning these plastic bottles and plastics into the, in quotes, biofuel. The production of these fuels can create air pollution that can cause cancer. People are studying it, saying that 1 out of 4 people that are exposed to this stuff can get cancer in their lifetime. The risk of it from the vapors that come out from this process of turning the plastic into biofuel is 250,000 times the level acceptable by the EPA. They haven't actually started making this yet. They got the green light to do it, right? And of course, as per usual, cancer burden falls disproportionately on the poor people that live around the petrochemical area where they're building the stuff. Now, this is in Mississippi. You ever been where there's oil refineries? Of course, it's not the greatest place to live, and it's always poor people live around there. Anybody with any money or something's not going to be living next to a petrochemical plant. They stink. In Baytown, Texas, they were always having fires. Smell was coming out. I even bought my son a car from Baytown. The paint had all pitted off from all the petrochemical stuff landing on it while it was parked outside. This particular house is 3 blocks from the petrochemical factory, right? If it affects paint on a car that way, imagine what it does to people, you know? And of course, when they try to defend it, the companies that are doing it, right, here's what they come up with. They said, the government's lifetime cancer risk is a very conservative estimate with high uncertainty. Of course, they want to deny it. You know, just like the cigarette makers for decades said, oh, there's no proof that cigarette smoking causes cancer. When I was a kid, they used to advertise to a doctor saying, hey, smoke these cigarettes. It makes you feel good. You know, it revitalizes you. Yeah. Never listen to what any of these people have to say, that's for sure. It just goes to show that what they call biofuel is just a bunch of nonsense. I saw one the other day. I made a video on it about they were going to recycle all the blades from the wind turbines, right? They're made out of fiberglass. They want to recycle them. Well, they have chemicals that can break them down, right? I can imagine the stench that comes from the chemicals recycling these blades is going to create air pollution. They weren't talking about that. They said, oh, great, now we can recycle these blades. Breaking down the fiberglass using chemicals. Oh, yeah, that's not going to pollute, right? Of course it's going to pollute. You're probably better off just burying the stupid fiberglass blades in the ground. It's not going to hurt anything. They're just sitting there in the ground. Nothing's going to happen to fiberglass buried in the ground, right? Just leave them alone. Don't try to break them down with caustic chemicals, you know? Same thing with plastic bottles. Maybe a billion years from now, they'll figure out how to actually recycle them cleanly. And then, well, they're in that pile over there. Go ahead. Don't use caustic chemicals to create even more pollution to recycle something in the names of, oh, this is green, this is good. Because obviously it's not. If they're making biofuels and it creates all this pollution, what's the point of making it in the first place? Kylie3391 says, I have gurgling sounds when I turn my heat on. Got an '06 Nissan Sentra. I hear a gurgling sound when the heat's on. What could it be? All right, you got air in your system. What happens is when you get air, you're low on coolant. Air is there instead of coolant, right? And when the air goes to the heater core, you'll hear it gurgle. Because in most cars, the heater core is the highest point of your cooling system. And since it's the highest point, guess what air does? Air will always migrate to the top. So that will have air in it. So you need to bleed the air out of your car. Now, a simple way most people do it is you can just jack up the front of the car a little so the front's higher, run it with a fan in front of the car if it's hot outside, take the radiator cap off, and watch it and start adding coolant until all the air's gone. Now, some cars, you got to get a vacuum machine to suck them out, but that's just a Nissan Sentra, a little bitty 1.8 liter. You can easily jack the front of the car up, take the radiator cap off when it's cold, start it up, and just stand there and watch it. Keep pouring the coolant in until the air's gone, and the gurgling will go away. D. Brown 2001 says, should I replace my car battery if it still works? Got a 2008 Chevy, 63,000 miles. The battery was manufactured in 2011. Should I replace the battery? Well, it was manufactured in 2011. That means it's a 12-year-old battery. But if it still works, I mean, why not? Take a gamble, you know? What the heck? Maybe it's a super battery. Now, if you know a guy like me, or go to an auto parts store you trust, guys like me have very expensive equipment. We can hook up our analyzers, your battery, and we can tell you the exact percentage of life that's left. Our machines will show you what life is left. And let's say it's less than 25%, go ahead and buy another battery. But if it's over that, go ahead and keep driving it around. These computerized machines that we mechanics have now give a very good prognosis. They analyze the whole thing using computer software in a little box, and it will tell you the percentage of life left. And if it's over 25%, what the heck? Keep it. You might have some miracle battery that'll last forever. Who knows? But they can be tested accurately with these machines. Daniela 213 says, how can I detect transmission problems? I got a Ford F-350, 460 block gasoline engine. How can I tell if the transmission has problems? All right, well, if it shifts smoothly, doesn't have any problems, it's okay. When they start to go out, you'll be going down the road, accelerating, boom, boom. When it shifts gears, it'll bang. Or when it downshifts, it'll clunk. Or sometimes when they're really starting to go, you start it up in the morning, you put it in reverse, and it won't go backwards. That means it's starting to go out. Reverse gear often goes out first. You put it in reverse gear, it won't go. Or let's say you start it up and you're going forward. You put it in drive and it won't move. And then you got to put it back in park, rev it up a little, put it in drive. Then it goes. Then it's showing it's starting to wear out. And of course, if it slips, if you're going 60, you step on the gas and the engine revs up but it doesn't accelerate very well, that means the tranny's slip, and then you know it's starting to go out. Pretty easy test that anybody can do. TJB001 says, should I get a new transmission or fix the one I have? I have a 2000 Ford Mustang V8. Manual tranny, 108,000 miles. I changed the flywheel, pilot bearing, clutch cable, pressure plate, everything. And now it grinds when I try to put it in gear. Should I go ahead and get rid of my old one and get a new one, or should I fix the old one? My advice is get a new one. Very few people know how to fix modern standard transmissions correctly. Almost all the guys that I know are dead or retired. My old friend Wayner in Houston was great at it, but he's long dead. You can't use him. Now, the problem is 96% of Americans drive automatic transmissions, not standards anymore. So, you know what's going to happen is hardly anybody knows how to fix them. And the modern ones, there's just 2000s modern enough. They're still relatively complex standard transmissions. Nobody knows how to fix them. I wouldn't attempt to fix yours. I would just go get another one. And if you want, if you're gambling like rolling the dice, try a used one from a junkyard. But of course, that's pot luck. It may or may not be good. New one, of course, it's new. It's going to last quite some time. That one lasts 108,000 miles, and it's a GT V8, so I'm assuming you beat it, you drive it pretty hard. It might just be time to get another one. Tahoe owner 93 says, my two front doors are letting in water when it rains. What can be the cause? How should I fix it? 2001 Tahoe. First thing you want to do is open both doors. Look at the seals on the door, the rubber seals. When you open the door, you'll see the seals. If they're ripped, cracked, you need to replace them. That's kind of obvious, right? Say the seals are all clean and they're not ripped or anything. Could be the doors are worn, the hinges might need replacing because they're sitting too low. Now, what you can do with that is just get a bucket, fill it with water, put some food dye in it. Then you sit in the car with a flashlight and let somebody pour around the door, and then you can see exactly where it's coming from. You see the dye coming through, right, with a flashlight. Then you might see, well, there's a gap here because either the hinge is worn and it's sitting wrong, or maybe it got bent somehow. Somebody slammed the door in a seatbelt or something and it bent something. And sometimes the latches on the side of the car where the door latches in, they'll wallow out and it won't pull it in tight enough. Check that out too. But you can always tell by getting just water with any kind of food dye and pouring it around. You'll see where the red dye's coming from, and make sure that it's coming from the doors, because sometimes, let's say you got a sunroof, a lot of times the sunroof drains overfill and it'll leak in there because the sunroof drains are being overfilled because the little drain holes are clogged up. Then the water comes up and it can come through inside the car there too. Don't always assume it's a door. It may not be the door. That's why you want to use a bucket with water and some food dye, because then you can see it, pour it on the sunroof, see if it's coming through somewhere. David 650 says, which EV should I buy? I'm looking for an EV that's built in America. What would be more reliable? The VW ID4, Tesla Model 3, Ford Mach-E, or the Bolt EUV? Okay. Well, the Ford Mach-E, of course, is made in Mexico. Not a fan of Mexican-built things. I would not buy one. Now, they claim they're not going to be building the Bolts anymore, but now they say they are. Just for that reason, who knows what Chevy's going to do? I wouldn't touch that either. The VW ID.4. They're just starting that production stuff up in Tennessee, right? I'd be very leery about new stuff, and I've read some bad things. I haven't seen any personally yet. None of my customers have bought any. Most of my customers aren't buying electric cars. They said they'll wait till Hades freezes over before they're going to buy that technology and then spend all that money and get stuck running out of power. What's proven as reliability as it stands today, I'd say get the Tesla Model 3. Like I said, I wouldn't buy any of them. I'm not an electric car fan. But the Model 3 has the lowest repair bills over time out of any of those. The fit and finish is terrible. You're paying a lot of money for a vehicle that basically isn't put together all that great. They run. It's not like they fall apart or anything. And people have this thing for Tesla. So I guess if you decided after you had it, gee, electric cars aren't for me, you can always find somebody else will buy it because they're nuts about Tesla. So out of those, I'd say get a Tesla. I personally wouldn't buy any of them, but the other ones are either unproven or they shown they have problems like the Bolt. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.